Thank you so much for joining us for Wine and Wisdom. I think this is our 8th episode today, Deb. Is that right?
Oh my gosh. I don't know, but that sounds right. Wow.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been fun. So today we're going to talk about rocking your goals. And because we have a smaller group today, I would love to start off with introductions so we can get to know each other and who's here. Casey, would you get us started?
So I'm Casey Whelan. I'm a financial service professional. So every Wine and Wisdom has been super, super informative and kind of ramped me up another notch. So I'm really excited about rocking your goals, because I do have some big goals, and we've talked about shifting our goals during this COVID. And for me, it's been a whole different ramp up. And so I'm excited about this.
Thank you so much. I'm excited too. Julia?
Hi, I'm Julia Searchin. I'm an independent college counselor. I help high school kids and their parents navigate the transition from high school to college with some semblance of sanity, if that's possible during these times. I'm really excited to be here too, because the whole issue of living our priorities and living our goals is very important to me. And I think it's very easy to lose sight of those and get caught up in having to do all these things. And so getting a chance to step back and take another look is something that I think is really beneficial to me and really, really healthy. So excited, very excited. I started sorting all my little things.
Oh, yay. We'll talk about those in just a minute. Kathy.
Hi, my name is Kathy England. My company is Time for Success. I am a colleague of Whitney's in the National Association Productivity and Organizing Professionals. Is that the right name? We used to have a different name. I'm actually more at this point in my career a coach, and I specialize in working with adults who have ADHD or strongly suspect that they have ADHD. And this topic is particularly interesting. I just finished a coaching class a week or so ago based on Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead. And one of the last parts of that was focused on looking at your needs and your values. And so I had done this exercise previously, and she had a little bit different focus. So I thought this would be great to participate. So thank you.
Thanks for coming today, Kathy. And just so all of you know, Kathy is going to be our guest speaker next Wednesday on right sizing with ADHD. And we're really excited for that. Harold, so glad you could join us. We're just doing introductions right now.
Having trouble with the camera, so I might be in and out. I'm here.
Harold, would you like to tell us just a little bit about yourself?
I'm sure. Harold Kurt. Work with a company called Legal Shield. I'm retired and having fun. I've been attending Wine and Wisdom every chance, and it's a great place to visit. Thanks for inviting me, Whitney.
Thanks for being here. Devin.
Hi, everybody. I think I know most of you at this point. I'm Devin Lee. I work for Whitney, with Whitney also at Big Rocks Organizing. I'm her online business manager, and I do professional organizing on the side with Whitney as well.
And Devin is a fabulous online business manager. If you need any assistance with managing your social media, she is a wonderful resource for that.
Thanks. Oh, and I'm also very excited to be at Wine and Wisdom per usual. Forgot to mention that.
It's not obligatory. My name is Whitney Ziegler. I'm the founder and the owner and a professional organizer and right-sizing coach with Big Rocks Organizing. Welcome to Wine and Wisdom. I'm just so excited to have everybody here. if anybody is, I think everyone here is familiar with Zoom, but does anyone have questions about using it? Okay, I just wanted to check in just to be sure. And most folks I know are muting to limit background noise when they're not speaking. Thank you for doing that as well. So today's presentation or today's discussion, I wanted to divide it into 3 different parts. The first part will be talking about our needs and values. And then the second part will be talking about setting goals. And the third part is practical planning. So how do we put our goals into action and actually make them happen? And how do we stay on track if maybe we get derailed in the process? So I would love to hear from you. Who had a chance to do the exercise before coming here today? And it's totally okay if you didn't. So Kathy did. Anybody else? I know Julia was starting to sort her cards, and that's okay. So maybe we'll make that homework if you're up for that. So let's talk a little bit then about what is a need and what is a value. And Kathy, because I know you've been through this exercise before, I might ask you to volunteer first. Like, when you think of a need, what does that mean to you? How do you define that?
Needs are, I look at it as something that you can't do without. And I see the values of the things that are important to you. Sometimes it's hard to really distinguish because they often seem very similar.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I once heard the analogy, it might have been Denslow Brown, who's our coaching instructor, trainer. I think she likened needs to being like oxygen, something that you can't live without. And if you don't have it, life doesn't work. So I'm really curious, for even if you haven't done the exercise, I'm sure you can think about, what is something that is a need for me? Anybody willing to share or volunteer? Julia.
So in this time of COVID, I live in a single person household, and companionship is something, and the lack of it is causing me to suffer.
Oh, I am sorry to hear that. But yes, companionship is so important, especially during this time, as you mentioned.
Companionship or fellowship.
Nice. Anybody else? What are some of your needs? Something you can't live without? Kathy.
Well, this actually fits with time of COVID, and my first need, and I had done this a long time ago, and I've repeated it, and it consistently comes as top as health. Because without health, a lot of other things aren't going to be able to happen.
Yeah, for me too. That's one of my needs as well. I'm curious, over time, when you did this exercise before till now, did your needs change or have they remained consistent?
I did this exercise, the time I repeated it was actually 3 years ago, and there had been about an 8-year gap between, and the only difference was that courage was a new value that I had, and this was subsequent to the 2016 election that shifted for me, and I was very surprised. But everything else was consistent, and I did it totally, just starting all over.
That's really interesting that an outside event could be a catalyst for our values and our needs to change too. Like Julia, you mentioned that COVID has brought fellowship or companionship to the top of your needs right now.
I think that I always knew that was a big need for me, but it just reinforces it. I think a lot of times we take things for granted. And then, of course, you know, what's the song? You don't know what you're missing till there's a song. Come on, somebody help me out.
You don't know what you got till you gone.
You don't know what you got till it's gone. Yeah. And yeah, thank you, Devin. That's exactly right.
Nice. I feel like there's a song for everything.
There it is.
How about anybody else? Like, what is something that you just can't live without?
The first thing that came to mind was same as Julia. If I wasn't sure I was an extrovert before COVID, I certainly know now, because not having access to my people was really difficult. It just wasn't working. And so I alleviate that with like phone calls and social distance hangouts. But a different need of mine, I realize, is the need for adventure and novelty, and having something fun to either be doing or looking forward to, or else I get just cabin fever.
Yes. And Casey wrote in the chat that exercise, alone time, and her career are needs. Thank you for sharing those. I know mine, I did this exercise about 2 years ago, and I had 3 needs. And then in doing it again, I decided to add a couple more. So mine were health, like Kathy, self-worth, love, autonomy, and nature, and being connected to nature. So values, let's talk about, like, how do values differ from our needs?
Well, I liked what the sheet said, that that values were inspirational. So for me, they're things that are like guiding principles for how I want to live my life.
Nice. I love that definition. So values are inspirational and guiding principles for how you want to live your life. What were some of your values, if you feel comfortable sharing?
Sure, absolutely. I think my top 3 values were compassion, service, and equality. In no particular order.
So, another, I think, differentiating thing for values is that they make life worth living. And then once our needs are met, we're able to focus on our values. But it's hard to focus on them when our needs haven't been met, if that makes sense. It's kind of like we need that foundation in place, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so to speak. Yeah. So I'm curious, what inspires you? What are your values? Kathy, I see you nodding your head. If I could pick on you again, so to speak.
Well, it's interesting because you and I seem to have a number that are very similar, but the value that surprised me the most the first time I did it, but it has been consistent, is autonomy. And I reflected that that's why I have my own business. I looked at all the times I worked for someone else and realized that ultimately the reasons I decided to leave working for someone else is the need for autonomy. And through my career, I've worked for a lot of other people, but when it wasn't working anymore, it was because autonomy was taken away. And I realized then when my own business, there's certainly downsides. You don't have same kind of security if you have a regular paycheck or vacation benefits or healthcare benefits coming in, but the value of the autonomy so outweighed all those other pieces. So it was a very aha moment to realize how important autonomy is for me.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like I can so relate to that. Like when COVID first hit and everything was so uncertain and unknown, I thought about going back to a regular losing my autonomy really brought forth how important that value is for me. Yeah, absolutely. So I could definitely relate to that. Anybody else have a value that you'd like to share?
For me, I put autonomy, also knowledge and growth.
And what do those words mean for you? Because I think words can mean different things to different people. So I'm curious, like, what does growth mean for you, for example?
Yeah, for me, I always want to be growing. I always want to be learning more. And I feel like I always want to grow emotionally. I want to grow like physically strong, like always trying to grow my health and my knowledge, and just trying to grow as a person. That makes me feel like really lit up when I'm actively doing those things, which I think kind of ties into knowledge too. Like when I'm learning, I feel really lit up.
Harold, I think I saw you unmute briefly. Were you about to say something?
It was a smart ass comment. Never mind. You can't grow too much in your house, so don't.
I'm also already too tall for my house, so I won't get any taller.
For those who don't know, Devin lives in a 250 square foot tiny house.
So I didn't have a whole lot of time to look at the values, but there's two that just scream me, and that's the family and the honesty. Because my life is built around my family, despite the fact that I need my alone time. And that's so I can be there for them when they need me. But then there's a couple of others that, for me, Devin, growth and knowledge are so hand in hand that it's like I'm not sure. I would need to mull over those, because you need to learn something every day and you need to keep growing. Otherwise, you're moving backwards. You can't be static. And then it was the same thing of adventure and service. It's like I do what I do because I want to be of service to others. And I believe in volunteerism and all those other things, but life is a journey. It's all about the adventure. So it's kind of like, how do you choose that third value? I take a long time to mull over.
You don't have to limit yourself to just 3, Casey. You could choose more. Would anybody like to share or reflect on any insights that they realized about their values before we talk about setting goals based on those needs and values?
This is to be super personal. This is such an interesting time for me to do this exercise, because something I've been talking about with my therapist lately is what are my needs and what are my values. And you know, when the relationships I have, the friendships I have with all the people in my life, like she said that, you know, your needs are for you, but values are things that you often share with other people. And that needs don't have another name attached. They're just something for you. And values are more something that you share. So I feel like this is such a timely exercise, because I've been trying to narrow down, like, what are my needs? What are my values? And what's the difference? So yeah, that's my insight. This is awesome.
Thanks for sharing that, Deb. I had never thought of it in that way, as one being more internal and the other external that you can share. Yeah. I know in the worksheet, it did state that some of our needs are things that we need to provide for ourselves, and some of them need to be in our environment. But I hadn't thought of like the values as actually being shared with others. So that's an interesting lens, and I would love to, I'm going to go back and look at my values later through that lens. So thanks for sharing that. Cool. I'm going to kind of transition us to the second part of our topic today. So the actual goal setting. So when what are our values, then how do we set goals based on them? I know that many of you are probably familiar with SMART goals. You raise your hand if you are. Okay. And if not, that's totally fine too. So I might just do kind of a quick overview of that. I'm going to share my screen. We're not doing a PowerPoint today, but I have different PDFs that I'll be bringing up. Bear with me here. I've got to move you guys over. Okay, can you see that okay? So I can't see anybody nodding, so.
I can see it just fine.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
It's a little awkward sharing screens, I feel like, on Zoom. So I think one of the first thing I would ask yourself when you're thinking of setting a goal is, does it align with my needs and my values that I've identified by doing this exercise that we were talking about? If not, do you want to go back to the drawing board and revise that goal so that it does align with your needs and values? Or do you want to discard it altogether? Is it really not an ideal goal for you to spend your time and your energy pursuing? And only you can decide that. But what we do know is that when we set goals and pursue goals that are based on our needs and values, especially on our values, which are inspirational, we tend to be a lot more motivated to achieve them and to keep going when like we might hit a snag or things might get difficult. So that's the first thing that I would ask myself when I'm setting a goal. And then the next thing is to see, like, does it meet our SMARTer criteria? So SMART goals are this acronym. It was originally created by a man named Peter Drucker, and it comes from a book called Management by Objectives. And then it's been tweaked to add an extra ER to SMARTer. So as you can read here, the S stands for specific. It's simple, sensible, significant. The M, measurable. Can we measure this goal? Is it meaningful too, or is it motivating? So these letters can have multiple things stand in for them. A, is it achievable or attainable? R, is it relevant? Is it reasonable, realistic? Are there resources available? Is it results-based? T for time-bound, time-limited, timely, time-sensitive, time cost limited. And the E stands for evaluated, and R, reviewed. And those are kind of rinse and repeat steps. We want to be from time to time evaluating and reviewing our goals to check back in and see, do they align with our needs and values currently? And do they still match these criteria, or do we need to tweak them in some way? So that would be the second step. I would take that goal and measure it up against those criteria. And then this handout, which we'll send home with everybody, or Devin will email out tomorrow, is how to use the SMARTer goals. So questions to ask yourself as you're looking at each individual letter. And then there's a second page here too. So it just goes into more depth. And I definitely don't want to read this to you because you're all fine, intelligent folks. But so those are some of the steps. Also, too, that last R could stand for a reward. So some of us are motivated by rewards and thinking about, okay, what will I reward myself with after I accomplish this goal? And it could be anything from maybe some reading for pleasure, or a special treat, or time with a loved one, or maybe spending time in nature, whatever you want it to be. So I was wondering if anybody has an example goal that they wouldn't mind sharing with the group.
So I actually have a goal every day of setting 2 appointments. And if I set 2 appointments, then I do get a break. And that means kind of basically that portion of my day is done and I get to stop getting off the phone, getting off the whatever. So sometimes my entire day can be done in the first networking appointment I have.
Excellent. So Casey, I'm going to ask you to tie that goal of setting up 2 appointments a day back to your needs and your values. Can you make that connection for us?
Yeah, so that's a simple breakdown of the steps to the bigger goal. The bigger goal is my career, very important. I did take a hiatus of 6 months and determined that being a stay-at-home mom was not my way of going. Career is very important. So my bigger goal is actually to reach executive council level within my company. To do that, I have to reach a certain level of production, which means I have to do something, da 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 da. And to achieve that, if I just set 2 appointments a day, I will have the activity level it takes. Pretty simple breakdown. So all I have to do, it doesn't really matter what kind of appointments they are, because it just builds the pipeline. It's fairly simple. So it's a backwards working. I didn't really, but the big goal as far as the career portion is I want to continue to build. Right now, I want to be executive council for next year. That means I have to do this. And that's the backwards work on.
Okay, so you did some reverse engineering there. Thank you for sharing how that connects to your value or need. Career was one of your needs. Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm curious how you landed on 2 appointments a day. If there was any specific, like, where did you land on that criteria from?
So actually, if you have 5 to 6 appointments a week, it will lead to a certain level of production that will lead to a good salary. I don't want a good salary. I want a great salary because I believe about opportunity and adventure and being able to be of service to others, and all that stuff. So I want 10 or more appointments a week. And so that's basically, once again, it's that reverse engineering. If you do 5 to 6, you will have a certain level. You will be summit level. You'll be this level. And it's basically, we're all in a numbers game. We understand numbers. That's what I deal with as a financial service professional. I will sit down with you and say, so when you retire, you want to have an income you're paying yourself of X amount of dollars. We'll reverse engineer it. Do the same thing with my own career.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing that tool, that strategy with us. We really appreciate that. Would anybody else like to share a goal that they have? Kathy.
There's a little bit of a history around this one. Several years ago, I read a book called The Practicing Mind by Thomas Sterner. And I had the sense that I'd like to create a group using that book as the curriculum. And every year, at the beginning of the year, I'd say, okay, I'm going to do this. And it's like, just never happened. Well, this year, just as COVID was starting and we were starting to lock down, a coaching class that I was taking, we had a bonus class. And the idea was, what are you going to do with this happening? And all of a sudden it occurred to me, this is an opportunity to be of service by creating this group. And the missing link had been, I wanted to offer it as a service, not something to get paid for. And that was the barrier. I didn't have to do the marketing for it, but I really wanted to give it away. So with that in mind, then all the other pieces fell in place. And I made it something that only active clients that I had, I handpicked them, I invited them to it. Originally had 6 people who said yes, ended up we had 5 people who stayed, and I set it up for a period of 5 weeks. And it was by Zoom. I'd never done a group on my own by Zoom, but it met all, I found in the details once I decided I was ready to go for it. And that barrier, the limiting thing was, I don't want to charge it, service. And I use this another part of the backstory is I used to do a lot of volunteer work. I haven't really done a lot of volunteer work for several years. And I thought, okay, this is an opportunity to do volunteer work. And it fits with my values of autonomy. It's my own group. I'm making it all up. It involves creativity. Again, I'm creating it how I want it to look like. And one of the values is excellence. Well, I was so pleasantly thrilled, delighted. The group was wildly successful. We went through the book as the curriculum and great participation. And as it came towards the end of covering the curriculum, I said, would you be interested in continuing? And every single hand in the Zoom group went up. So I added 5 more weeks to this. And this time it wasn't based on reading a particular chapter and discussing it, but it was taking the activities from the practicing mind that people would practice. And so each call was then focused on what was the outcome for people of the practice that they had committed to. And at the end of this 5th week, people said, I don't want this to end. So we took a hiatus, but we have a reunion, I'm calling it, coming up on August the 12th. And we did a lot of brainstorming at the end of the 10th week, what people would like. And I have another book that I want to introduce. And that is the book called The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. It's one of her earlier books, and it meshes really well with the practicing mind because she has 10 principles or guideposts, I think, are the language that she uses them. And I can see how it fits perfectly with the curriculum. The practicing mind leads to the gifts of imperfection, dealing with practicing these things. So it's like what I found helps me keep a goal is once I can declare it to others. And that's what the first step was when I asked my first prospective member of the group, are you interested? And she said yes. That got the momentum going. So that's a lot of what I've learned about myself, is actually stating it to someone else then begins to make it happen. So I'm positively excited that the next phase then is this next book, and it's still going as a service. And I'm hoping all 5 people will be able to recommit. And if I've already put the dates on my calendar to start in September. So that's my story of setting a goal that had been set many years ago. And then COVID was actually a big impact in terms of making it happen. Long story.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. Julia's giving you applause there. And that's funny. I have the 10 guideposts for wholehearted living are underneath the glass on my desktop. So I've got it printed out right here from her book. So for you, so it sounds like you found that kind of having that outside force of declaring your goal to somebody was instrumental in making it happen. And we do know that by either writing down our goals or sharing them with others, we're 40% more likely to achieve them. So I'm curious, what other tools have you all found that work for you to motivate you to set and achieve your goals?
I'll share again because this comes out of Daring Greatly, or sure. Dare to Lead. I'm sorry,
We'll hear from Kathy and then Devin after.
So go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead, Kathy.
Okay, this is quick. In Dare to Lead, she had a list of values. So we're somewhat the same, but it was a long list. It wasn't separated needs and values. And I went through, and the idea was you choose only 2, which was a challenge. But what the 2 that I selected were making connections, it was connections and making a difference. And for me, connections was not with people, but it was with ideas. And making a difference through those ideas totally fit with this group. So it was another piece of making connections.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing that. So it sounds like this goal that you had and that you realized aligned so closely with your needs and your values. Like a marriage made in heaven, so they say. Deb, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to, since you mentioned tools, I was going to share some tools I use for my goals. When COVID hit, someone on Instagram tagged me in a 10 push-up challenge. But at the time I could do 0 push-ups, and that's always been something I always wanted to do, was just 1 push-up. And I always felt embarrassed that I couldn't. So I made that like a COVID goal to do a push-up. And so one of the things I did was like a habit tracker, which is like, here's my new one for push-ups, where like I track that, like I'm practicing, and like I got help from other people who like know about exercise on how to do a push-up and how to get there. So I was yeah, using my community, writing it down. And another thing I started doing that works anytime I want to reach a goal is in the morning when I meditate on the feeling of me achieving that goal and what it actually feels like. And I can do a push-up now, just one, but I'm working towards two. So those are 3 tools that really help me with my goals.
Hooray! That's awesome. And it's wonderful that you've identified tools that help support you. I'm curious if anybody else has tools that work well for them that they might want to share, because they might work well for someone else in this group too, or someone else who watches this episode even 2 years from now. Kathy.
I don't know if you can really see this. I made this a number of years ago. It's tracking water. I was in a business where I traveled a lot, lots of airlines and stuff like that, and it's easy to get dehydrated when we used to fly. So I made this up very portable, and I have one for each month, and it's got up to 12 on it. And so I've done this for 15 years now. I still keep track of the water. So every time I drink a glass of water, and it's been delightful. I used to save them, and then I don't need to save them. I can toss them out. They're clutter after the month is done. But this was very helpful in terms of tracking.
I can't believe that. That's amazing. I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand or anything. I never drink enough water. And I set a goal, I'm going to drink 4 glasses of water today. And I never do it. I mean, it's just, so that's really cool.
It is, and so simple too, right? Casey put in the chat that Wine and Wisdom and having an accountability partner, which she found after our episode that we did on accountability partnerships, have helped her with her industry. So that's really awesome to hear, Casey. Thanks for sharing that.
Casey, how did you find your accountability? I mean, maybe that, I'm sorry, I shouldn't talk about that here.
No, it's okay to ask.
So after that episode talking about, thinking you didn't have to be local necessarily because your partner is not local. Whitney, thank you for sharing that. I happened to be speaking with a regional manager for my company, and I'm like, who came from New York. And I said, you wouldn't happen to know anybody who knows me fairly well, because I'm very transparent. You wouldn't happen to know anyone that you would think would be a good accountability partner for me. And so he hooked me up with a couple of names. And so it is one of those things of, it just opened my eyes to that I could look wider. And I think that's utilizing these groups, utilizing these other tools that we could have, and not thinking so one way, like, the charts, what Devin's talking about, thinking, and even I private messaged Devin, and my coach is my kid. My kid ran backwards. I can run 3 miles now. Couldn't run a block, and my kid wouldn't run backwards. Come on, Mom, you can do it. You can do it. And then finally riding on a skateboard next to me. So it's just that having the people that believe in you and are willing to say, just do it. You said you wanted to, just do it. And those are the accountability partners in your life. And they can be someone, they don't need to be the people right here. They can be the people on Zoom.
I think having I would love to find an accountability partner. I really would. That was a fantastic session. But I think that there's a real benefit to having an accountability partner who is not in your area, your geographic area. I think that's, sorry for taking us off track.
No, this is still on track, because we're talking about how do we stay on track with our goals? How do we stay motivated, keep going forward? What are tools for success? So thank you. I have a tool that I wanted to share that works for me, and it might not work for everybody, but I just wanted to share it, to put it out there. It's kind of a visual tool, and putting things in my calendar, actually blocking out the time. I see some nods here. So I'll pull up some worksheets that I use that Devin was lovely enough to create for me. Thank you, Dev. So this is one that I generally do at the beginning of each year, or maybe when we've had a pandemic and I'm doing a complete goal reset like now. I usually choose a word of the year, something to motivate me. In the past, my word has been courage. This year, it's brave. And I try to set at least one goal in these different areas of my life, or in these different categories. And these can be switched. So, I mean, you wouldn't have to use my categories, but I'm happy to share this worksheet with folks if it helps you brainstorm or helps you plan and track your goals. So I generally will have about 3 in each category. I have a tendency to set way too many goals, so I try to reel it back and just focus on a few at a time. And that leads me to my next worksheet. But before I do that, does anybody have any comments or questions about this one? Or maybe you use a similar tool for yourself?
Please share.
Okay, so the next step then, after I set my goals for the year, these are my active goals. So I have no more than 6 at a time. And I call these my projects, my current projects. So let me share a quick example with you. Let's see. Okay, I don't know if you'll be able to read this, but I use sticky notes, because then once I finish a goal, I can just take it off and recycle it, and I could put a new active. So one of my goals was to plan a 100th birthday party for my mother-in-law. So you can see the different kind of sub goals that I had listed there at the time. Her birthday was in late January. And we successfully met that goal, and we're really glad that we got to celebrate her birthday before COVID. So then from there, I block out my time using a weekly planner. Some people, they like this because it has the actual times there. I like to have a little bit more flexibility of when I get certain things done. So I use a bullet journal, but this helps me kind of visually block out my week, and I can see where I have bits of time available to work on my different goals, my different projects. And then I'll physically build them into the schedule. And I'll show you a little example of what that looked like.
It's a bullet journal.
Yes, and I'm going to turn this one over to Deb, because Deb, I feel like you are the bullet journal expert here.
Oh my gosh, I love bullet journals. Julia, I can send you a link about them, but really briefly, I'll show you. I don't know if you can see this, but a bullet journal is just a journal that typically has like a grid. And this one's not decorated, unfortunately, but basically, typically how it goes is you have like a yearly overview, a monthly overview, weekly, your to-do list, and the point is you can customize it however you want, depending on what your life is in that moment. It's usually really creative, and there's all kinds of like modules that people put in. Yeah, I could talk about that for a long time, but I'm going to make a note to send you a video of an overview, because they're really helpful for when you're achieving your goals too, because you can kind of create your own little modules.
Yeah, I think you sent me the links when I first started bullet journaling, Devin, and I watched 3 different videos and gave me some great ideas for getting started. And you can make it as complicated or as simple as you like. I try to keep mine simple. I don't know.
I keep mine simple.
Can you see this?
Oh, that's beautiful.
So this is mine for the week, and it's called Blue Elephant. And it has the pages already created at the beginning for planning your year, and there's a vision board space at the beginning, and then the weekly goals, and then there's, I think, the last third of the book is available for notes or just your to-do list, your journaling. things like that. So that's my most helpful tool. I got away from doing it for about 4 weeks, and I was at an utter loss and went back to it because I'm a very visual person and it works well for me. So check out the videos, Julia, and let us know, if that's something that might be helpful for you too. And it doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to purchase anything. It can just be a sheet of paper. So yeah, thanks for asking that question. I'll just show you guys a couple more PDFs if that's okay. So we looked at, these were the projects. Sorry, I'm trying to, here we go. Here is the kind of an example of the weekly planner. So currently I'm using my bullet journal, but this is an example from last December. And I just had these Post-it note flags that I could just take off and put on for the following week if I needed to change anything. But I realized, a lot of things could carry over from week to week, or I could just take the sticky note for one client appointment and put it on the next week. So it gave me a space to see, okay, here's like Thursday morning, I've got a chunk of time where I could work on some of my various goals and projects there. It also helps me see when I'm getting too busy. I have a tendency to do that and to overschedule, and I like to see a lot more white space or downtime in my calendar. It can be a helpful tool, that as well. Something that I also do with my calendar is I compare it to my needs and my values. And I ask myself, I do an audit, and I ask myself, are these activities aligning with my needs and with my values? What can I trim out? What can I let go of to make room for more of the things that support me? And then on the right side, there's a daily planner, and I'll share all of these worksheets with you guys. We'll have Devin email them out tomorrow. But this too, it just gives you a visual of your day if you are a visual person. And I do different colors are coded for different activities for me. So you can see what my schedule was like on Thursday, December 12th of 2019. And then I had 3 goals, and I try to just limit myself to 3 per day. And if I do get them done, well, that's fine. I can tackle something else on my never ending list, but or take something else off of my active project board. So, but I do just try to limit it to the 3, because otherwise I feel like if you see a list of 50 things, you're of the day, and by limiting them and crossing them off, it really motivates one at a time. The just one thing, or the JOT method as well. If we get this little rush when we cross something.
Whitney, if you can hear us, you're frozen.
Shoot, when did I freeze?
Oh no, wait, you're coming back. The last thing I heard was you were talking about the JOT method.
Okay. No, I was just saying method can be really motivating for folks because you're focusing on just one thing, JOT, at a time. And we get this dopamine kick when we cross something off our list, and then it motivates us to go on to the next thing. So, yeah. So I'm happy to share those worksheets in the email that'll go out to all of you who attended today. Does anybody else have questions about tool, or do you have any other tools or resources that you'd like to share with the group? Julia.
This goes back to when you were talking about the SMART goals, or smarter, and that the second R you said could be either reviewed or could be reward. One thought that occurred to me is, if our goals are really aligned with our values, then accomplishing the goal in and of itself becomes rewarding. So I don't know, that just came into my head, that and then that provides more inspiration for us to move forward.
I think that's an excellent point, that when we are living in alignment and achieving goals that are very closely tied with our needs and values, it is a reward in and of itself.
I mean, and ultimately those intrinsic rewards are much more satisfying and motivating than external, extrinsic rewards. So.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Thank you for sharing that insight. Does anybody else have a question or an observation or a resource to share?
I do. You reminded me, Whitney, and maybe you said this while you were frozen for a minute, because it's related to Jot, but one of my favorite books is Eat That Frog. And there's a quote by Mark Twain that I forget how it goes exactly, but he's basically like, if you have to eat a frog, like eat it first thing. And if you have to eat 2 frogs, you eat the ugliest one first. And so when I feel really overwhelmed with my to-do list, I try, and actually when I worked in a Montessori, I worked with early elementary kids, and part of their work is learning how to make a to-do list for the day and make intentions, and how do you stick to that work. And I taught them, like, what's your frog? And they really liked that. So I feel like that's a fun one for me, is just like eat your biggest frog and then the rest of your day is fine.
Well, I think that that's really true. Once you get the hard thing, over with, it's like, okay, man, I got this. But I think another thing is, when we're talking about, I mean, these are all time management skills, that each of us have a different time of day that we are really in the zone. I mean, for me, it's morning. If I have anything hard to do, I need to do it in the morning. But if you're not a morning person, like if you're in your zone at 10 o'clock at night, heaven forbid, then maybe that's when you need to eat your frog.
That is a really great point, Julia. And there's a really neat book called When by Dan Pink, and it talks about chronotypes. The lark people who are at their best in the morning, the owls at night, and then the majority of folks are third birds, is what he calls. But he talks about peaks and troughs. Like, we all have that peak where we're at our very best, but then there's also kind of a second peak later in our day. So it's a really quick, easy read, and I found it really fascinating. If you all are interested, it's called When by Dan Pink.
So eat your frog when you're in the zone.
Kathy.
There's another book that talks about that. It's called Why We Sleep, and I'm going to grab it from my bookshelf. He talks about the idea of owls and larks, and he presents it from an evolutionary standpoint, that if you go back to prehistoric times, people needed people who were alert at night so they could watch everybody and protect them. We needed people who were alert in the day so they could be watching and taking care of things while the owls were sleeping. And he said there's about 40% of the population, his perception is there's about 40% of the people who are larks, 30% are owls, and then this other group is they can kind of go either direction. But that presenting that from an evolutionary standpoint, I thought was just a fascinating perspective. So it's goes along with what Pink is saying, but it's taking a slightly different perspective of why it happened that way.
That's really fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. I also wonder too if it changes as we age. I know it can change under different circumstances too, like maybe we're dealing with anxiety or depression, or menopause. I mean, so many different, or COVID, so many different things can affect, I feel like, you know, when we're at our best too. So it's really fascinating. Anybody else have tools or insights to share related to goals?
That's a simple question. Kathy, I hate to go way back, but I was writing down the books that you were talking about. What was the Brene Brown book that you were talking about? The second one?
The second one was The Gifts of Imperfection.
It's really good, Harold. And I haven't read Dare to Lead yet, Kathy, but I definitely want to read that one.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. Just looking at my notes. One last thing I just wanted to say, we were talking about, you know, accountability and having a partner, and we've talked about vision boards as tools. But something too is just giving yourself permission, for example, to hit the reset button and just start completely over, and to try a different system. If what you're currently using isn't working for you, give yourself permission to experiment without any judgment. Just kind of look at it as a science experiment and put on that scientific hat, and maybe look at it with an observational eye rather than a judgmental one, and just see, what do you learn about yourself? What are you curious about? Kathy, do you want to jump in and add anything?
In Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead, she introduces the concept of permission slips, which are taking a Post-it and literally write down. The first one was, I gave myself permission to be present. Another one, I gave myself permission to cry. Another one, I gave myself permission to say no. And so I put them all on this and have this so that I can look at it all the time. But it's absolutely that same idea. It is a permission slip to do whatever you want to do that's going to be helpful for you, helping. So
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. So Julia, if you try a bullet journal and it doesn't work for you, we give you permission to recycle it. Just let it go. Move on to experiment with the next tool that works best for you.
I am like really, frankly, overwhelmed with all the possibilities and ways you could go. I think what I'm really going to start with is probably look at I have to-do lists every day, and frankly, there are more things on each day that I can get done, and I need to reevaluate my time planning. But I think that what a good exercise would be is for me to take my goals or my needs and my values, and see how the things that I'm doing, do they really tie into those? Like one of my values is service, and I've spent a fair amount of time this week doing things, responding to other people's needs. My next door neighbor has COVID, and when I found out, I said, is there something I could do for you? And she said, yes. As a matter of fact, I just ordered new glasses and they're in, and I'd really like to get them, but would you mind going to pick them up for me? And I said, absolutely. And so, in a way, I feel like I'm wasting time, but I realize what I did ties in with one of my higher values. So if what I'm spending my time on connects to those values or needs, good. If they don't, then I really need to look at what I'm doing with my time. So
thank you for sharing that. I think that's a wonderful note to end on for today. You brought everything back full circle for us. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you, Whitney.
thank you, Whitney.
Thank you, Whitney.
Okay.